Today we're going to tackle one of the biggest, most fundamental questions humanity has ever asked. It's a question that really gets to the very core of our reality.
So yeah, let's dive right in. This single question, philosophers have been wrestling with it for centuries. And it's not just some abstract puzzle, right? It gets to the heart of what it means for you, for me, for anything at all to exist. It's a question so profound, it frames our greatest dramas and our deepest anxieties. We all instinctively get the stakes here. We fear non-existence, that idea of just not being.
So where do you even start with something that massive? Well, instead of getting bogged down in a bunch of complex jargon, we're going to build a really clear, logical framework for thinking about existence. And we're going to start with 3 powerful foundational axioms. And this deep-seated, almost primal fear of nothingness, that's exactly why our starting point is so crucial. If we want to make sense of reality, we have to begin with what is, not with what isn't.
All right, this brings us to our first axiom. And for this, we're going to take a trip way back to ancient Greece. Back then, you had these 2 brilliant thinkers offering really different perspectives on reality. One was all about permanence, the other was all about constant change.
Now, at first glance, these 2 views, they might seem like they totally contradict each other. But it's probably better to think of them as 2 sides of the same coin. You could say Parmenides is looking at the whole system from the outside, seeing its eternal, unchanging nature. Meanwhile, Heraclitus is living inside that system, experiencing its constant, undeniable flow. And this, right here, is the genius of Parmenides. He gives us this rock-solid starting block. He basically argues that we can't logically start our thinking from nothing, because the very idea of nothingness existing is a contradiction. For it to exist, it would have to be something. It's a total mind bender, but it makes perfect sense. So, this brings us to our first fundamental truth, our first axiom. Being exists and nothingness does not. We have to start from the assumption that existence is the default state of things, not some weird exception. Okay, so we've got that huge concept of being as our foundation. Now for our second axiom, we're going to bring this framework way down from the abstract and get personal. We're talking about the most immediate reality you know, yourself. You know the famous philosopher René Descartes? He was on a mission to find one single truth that he absolutely could not doubt. And what he realized was, even if everything else was an illusion, the very act of him doubting his own existence proved that he, the thinker, had to exist. It's a powerful idea, and it gives us our second axiom.
And look, this axiom, you exist, it's not trivial at all. It's a really powerful stand against any philosophy that might try to tell you you're just an illusion, or a ghost in the machine, or just a collection of random biological processes. No, you are real. Your consciousness is real. And accepting that I exist has these huge implications for how we actually live. The philosopher Erich Fromm talked about this. He argued it means choosing a life of being over a life of simply having. It's about defining yourself by what you do and create an experience, not just by the stuff you own. Okay, so we've established our own existence is real. The next logical step then is to expand that circle of reality. We have to recognize the very real, independent existence of the world, and, crucially, the other people all around us. And this third axiom, that others exist, it provides a really vital balance. It helps us navigate a couple of powerful cultural forces that can seriously distort our sense of reality if we're not paying attention. So this table here shows how 2 major philosophical movements really highlight these risks. On one side, you've got modernism. It was all about creating these big, overarching systems and grand narratives. And the danger there is that the individual, the I, can just get lost in the structure, feeling like a tiny, insignificant cog in some massive machine. Then on the other hand, you have postmodernism, and its whole thing is deconstructing reality, questioning every truth, every narrative. The risk there is that you can take it so far that the objective existence of others, of the you, becomes uncertain, totally subjective. And this is exactly why a healthy, balanced worldview needs all 3 axioms working together. Being is real, you are real, and others are real. Holding all 3 of those as true protects us from these philosophical extremes and helps us ground our sense of reality in something solid. All right, so we've got our 3 axioms in place. Now, how do we actually put them to work?
Well, it turns out this whole philosophical framework connects directly to a fundamental, totally inescapable law of the universe. I'm talking about the second law of thermodynamics, better known as entropy. Put simply, the universe naturally trends toward chaos. Order takes effort. Disorder is the default state of things. Let's look at a simple example to see how this plays out. Just think of any complex structure, whether it's a building or a society or even a sandcastle. It takes immense energy, planning, and hard work to create it. But if you just leave it to its own devices, it will inevitably crumble and return to dust. Creation is an uphill battle. Destruction is a downhill slide. It's the path of least resistance. This quote from the Turkish poet Muhammad Akif Ersoy just captures this asymmetry perfectly. Destruction is easy. Any two people can tear something down. But creation, that requires vision, it requires genius, it requires immense effort, it requires a sultan and a master architect. So think about it. Every single constructive act you perform is you pushing back against this cosmic tide of chaos. Creating a piece of art, building a strong friendship, learning a new skill, even just organizing your thoughts to make a logical argument. All of these are acts of creating order, where disorder desperately wants to reign. And this is why our axioms matter so much. They're not just abstract ideas. They are the fuel for this beautiful, meaningful struggle. Affirming that being is real gives us a world to build in. Affirming that you are real gives you the agency to be a builder. And affirming that others are real, that gives you the purpose to build things that are actually worth sharing.
You almost have to start with that classic dilemma, the one Leibniz is often credited with. Why is there something? Why not just nothing?
It's a genuinely chilling thought. I remember reading Unamuno who said no vision of hell scared him, like the idea of absolute nothingness.
Yeah.
Heislick. Just void.
Exactly. And that fundamental terror is why philosophy, and I'd argue psychology too, needs a starting point. An axiom.
Like Parmenides.
Precisely. Parmenides' big declaration, existence exists. Non-existence, well, it can't.
Yeah.
Once you accept real being, then absolute nothingness just isn't logically on the table anymore.
Okay, that makes sense philosophically. But how does that help someone dealing with, say, anxiety or depression right now? If existence is a given, why the struggle?
Well, that's where psychology connects directly. A lot of existential angst, the conflicts, the feeling of meaninglessness, depressions. Yeah. It often stems from a deep-seated fear of non-existence.
The fear of death.
The fear of death, yes, or annihilation, as Otto Rank might put it. It's like a fundamental human trauma, that fear of just ceasing to be.
Right. And this seems to lead us straight into that really crucial shift the sources talk about moving from having to being. Erich Fromm is central here, isn't he?
Absolutely. Fromm was pretty stark about it. He basically said humanity's survival depends on shifting from this principle of having, of possessing, to the principle of being.
So what does being actually look like in practice? How do you be instead of have?
Fromm describes being Olmec as this active state. It's about loving things in their totality, embracing their vitality, their life, their potential for growth.
Okay.
Whereas the having mode treats everything like property, even abstract things. You can have love, have God, have an idea, treating it like something you own and control.
Can you give an example, like having love versus being love?
Sure. If you have a relationship, you might focus on controlling it, possessing the other person, fearing its loss because it's yours.
Right, like an asset.
Exactly. But if you approach it from a state of being, you participate in the relationship as a living process. You foster its vitality, you embody the act of loving, rather than trying to possess the feeling or the person.
That really clarifies it. Okay, stepping back a bit, even the definition of existence itself wasn't straightforward for the ancients, was it? Parmenides saw it as this fixed, unchanging one.
Yeah, something almost transcendent, permanent. But then you had Heraclitus saying, no, wait, the only thing that's permanent is change itself. Everything is in flux, immanence.
So who was right? Or is that the wrong question?
Well, interestingly, you could argue they both were, just from different angles. Heraclitus captures our subjective experience, right?
Yeah.
Inside, everything feels like it's constantly shifting. But Parmenides might be describing the objective reality, the fact that things exist, independent of how we perceive their changes.
Okay, so with those ancient ideas as a base, how did modern thinking grapple with this? Did we mess it up?
Well, you could say there were some missteps. Modernism, particularly with its very mechanistic, sort of Fordist worldview, tended to blur the I exist
How so?
by reducing people to cogs in a machine, almost interchangeable parts. Your unique subjective I gets kind of lost.
And then postmodernism.
Postmodernism arguably blurred the you exist. It pushed towards a kind of solipsism, where the self becomes the only real measure. If only my perspective matters, then your independent existence becomes questionable. It echoes the old sophists, in a way.
That sounds isolating and dangerous.
It can lead towards what some sources call the malignant tumor of philosophy, radical nihilism, the attempt to deny existence altogether.
But does anyone truly live that way, denying everything?
It's almost impossible. Nihilism tends to collapse on itself, and often what you see is that people who claim nihilism don't really embrace nothing. They just substitute God with new absolutes, new gods. Maybe it's nature or reason or power or just raw desire.
So to wrap this up for someone listening, how do we avoid these traps? How do we build that solid, healthy foundation?
It comes down to committing to 3 fundamental axioms, non-negotiables, really.
Okay, what are they?
First, Waarlijk Verger. Existence exists. There is an objective reality.
Got it.
Second, Sen Varsun.
You.
Exist. You, the listener, your subjective consciousness is real. You are a thinking, feeling self.
Right, the subjective I.
And third, crucially, Ben Varim, which means I exist, but in the sense of recognizing the other, acknowledging that other conscious selves exist outside of you.
So that's the escape from the solipsism trap. Recognizing the you to affirm your own I in a shared reality.
Precisely. True existence, meaningful existence, involves seeing and affirming that other you. The people who really seek knowledge, who grow, are the ones who look beyond themselves and keep asking why.
Which brings us to a final thought then.
Yes. Think about this. If real meaning, maybe even what some traditions call heaven, comes from valuing existence itself and actively loving the existence of others, and if being is this constant, active struggle against entropy, against the universe's tendency towards disorder, what specific effort are you making day to day right now to actively be, not just to have, but to truly be? Something to consider.
What if I told you that the solid world around you isn't really solid at all? Today, we're going to peel back the layers of reality itself to try and figure out what it even means for something to exist. And it all starts with one surprisingly tricky question.
I mean, just look around you. Right now, you probably see a chair, a table, the floor beneath you, things that feel solid. But here's the thing, if you ask a physicist what those things are really made of, they're going to tell you a story that just completely shatters the world you think you know.
It turns out our entire experience, this feeling of a solid, stable world, is basically a grand illusion. The reality of what's going on is built on principles that completely defy our everyday common sense. So yeah, let's dive into that.
To get to the bottom of this, we're not starting in some high-tech lab. We actually have to go way back to an ancient philosophical debate, a debate that gets right to the heart of what it means for anything to exist in the first place.
So on one hand, you've got this idea that the world is just a bunch of tiny, unthinking particles bouncing around in empty space. Simple. But on the other hand, you have this wild thought that reality itself needs a mind, an observer, for it to even pop into existence. This clash between pure stuff and conscious observation, it really sets the stage for everything we're about to uncover. And you know, even the forces we think we understand aren't what they seem. Take gravity. Einstein showed us it isn't some invisible rope pulling you down. Instead, picture this. The mass of the Earth literally creates a deep dent, a curve, in the fabric of space-time itself. So you're not being pulled down. You're just following the curve, like a marble rolling around the inside of a bowl. And gravity is just one piece of the puzzle. It turns out that every single interaction in the entire cosmos, from a galaxy spinning in space to the chemical reactions happening in your brain right now, it's all governed by just 4 fundamental forces. And these are the big 4. You've got gravity, which holds planets and stars together. You've got electromagnetism, which is behind everything from light to electricity to chemistry. And then, hidden deep inside the atom, you've got the strong and weak forces, holding the nucleus together and managing things like radioactive decay. That's it. The whole shebang is run by these 4 interactions.
Okay, but when we zoom down even further, past the atom to the scale of a single particle, the rules of reality just break. Down here in the quantum realm, the universe stops being this predictable machine and turns into this bizarre, ghostly dance of probability and pure chance. Down here, a particle like an electron isn't some tiny solid ball. Nope. Instead, it exists as this smear of potential. It's like a wave of probabilities spread out across space. It isn't in any one location. It's kind of in all possible locations at once.
So, and this is the part that just blows my mind, that wave of potential only collapses into a single particle in a single spot when we look at it, when we measure it. The very act of our observation forces the universe to pick one outcome. Before that moment, the particle isn't really there in any way we'd recognize.
So what does that mean? It means reality isn't like a movie that's already been recorded. It's being written moment by moment, emerging from this shimmering sea of quantum possibilities.
This strange connection, this link between observation and reality, has led some physicists to an even more radical idea. What if the most fundamental building block of the universe isn't matter, or energy, or even space and time? What if it's information? This idea was put to the ultimate test in a famous scientific battle over black holes. Stephen Hawking, for years, argued that black holes completely destroy the information of whatever they swallow. But others, like Leonard Susskind, fought back, insisting information can never be lost. And after decades, it turned out Susskind was right. Information is a fundamental, conserved part of our universe.
This just makes the mystery even deeper. If information is fundamental, what does that really tell us? Well, it suggests that on the deepest possible level, the universe operates like a kind of giant computer, with the laws of physics acting as its operating system and math as its programming language.
And now, let's zoom all the way out, from the quantum weirdness to the scale of the entire cosmos. Because when we do that, we find what might be the most baffling mystery of all, a universe that appears to be exquisitely, almost impossibly fine-tuned just for us to exist.
You see, all the fundamental numbers of our universe, the strength of gravity, the mass of an electron, they are all balanced on a razor's edge. If you could reach out and just turn the dial for any one of these values, even by a tiny, tiny fraction, the whole thing would just vanish. No stars, no planets, no chemistry, no life.
To give you some perspective, the odds of a universe like ours just happening by chance are 1 in, well, that number. A number so huge it's practically zero. We're not just talking unlikely here. We're talking statistically impossible.
So, what are we supposed to make of that? This incredible fine-tuning leaves us staring at two equally mind-bending possibilities to explain why we're even here to talk about it. So, option 1 is the multiverse. Maybe there are countless other universes out there, each with a random set of rules, and we just happen to win the cosmic lottery by being in the one where things work. Option 2? The rules weren't random at all. They were deliberately set. And this is where science hits a wall. It's a question that sits right on that profound border between physics and philosophy. So, wow, where has this whole journey taken us? We started with a solid world, and we found out it's an illusion. We dove into the atom and found this ghostly world of probability. We looked out at the cosmos and found an impossible, perfect balance.
And you know, the whole point of learning all this isn't to get rid of the mystery. It's to make it deeper. One of the sources uses this great Turkish word, hayret. It describes this feeling of profound, almost shocking awe, this wonder that turns the normal, everyday world into something miraculous, just by understanding what it's truly made of.
We've taken reality apart piece by piece, only to find that at the very bottom, there isn't a simple answer. There's just a much, much deeper question. And it's a question that invites all of us to look at the world and at our place in it with completely new eyes. Because maybe to understand what it means to be is just to stand in awe of the fact that we are.
Existence, what is real?
Exactly. And our sources are fascinating. They pull together physics, really deep physics, and philosophy.
So the mission today is to get a handle on what existence even means, looking at its building blocks, how we categorize it, and maybe what it all implies.
Right. And it kicks off with this old...
And while gravity, this warping, runs the big picture, everything else walking, phones working, the sun burning, that's down to the other forces.
The fundamental forces, right.
Exactly. Electromagnetism, that's friction, chemistry, light. Then the two nuclear forces, strong and weak, holding atoms together and driving fusion. Gravity's actually the weakest one of the bunch, strangely enough.
Okay, weird. So that's the big scale. But the sources then zoom right down to the quantum level, and it gets even weirder.
Oh, yeah. Because down there, the line between matter and energy gets blowaway. Think about light, the photon.
Particle and a wave. Learn that one.
Right. But then take the electron, a basic piece of matter. Our sources say it's not really a tiny ball sitting somewhere. It's more like a wave of probability.
A probability wave. So it isn't definitely anywhere.
Not until you measure it. That's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Partly you can't know its exact position and speed simultaneously,
Okay.
but it's deeper than that. The sources suggest the electron doesn't just have a probability of being somewhere. The very act of observing it, of measuring it, somehow collapses that wave and forces it into being a particle at a specific point.
Wait, so looking at it makes it real. Like Berkeley's to be perceived.
It really echoes that, yeah. And this leads to a crucial point the sources make. Knowledge or information isn't just abstract. It's treated almost like a substance, something that can interact with matter and energy.
Information as a substance, how does that work?
Well, think about the smallest possible scale, the Planck scale, the absolute minimum unit of distance or time. Information seems to travel in these tiny packets, these bits, that are described as one existing, one not existing, flickering in and out.
Okay, hold on. If the electron is just probability, where does the energy, the stuff, come from when we measure it and it becomes a particle? Does the information somehow become mass or energy?
The information seems to be the trigger, the key. It's what resolves the probability into actuality. And because reality has these minimum units, these Planck limits, it means movement is possible. Zeno's paradox is solved because you can't divide space infinitely.
So movement is real. Phew.
Right. But it implies consciousness, or at least information processing, might be baked into the fabric of reality itself.
That's a big leap. So information and knowledge are so fundamental. How do we categorize all these different kinds of being? This brings us to Hartman, right? New ontology.
Exactly. Nikolai Hartman tried to map this out. He suggested being has layers. There's real existence, that's stuff like matter, living things, consciousness, spirit.
Physical things, minds.
Yeah, but then there's ideal existence. This is where things like concepts, numbers, logic, values, even knowledge itself live. They exist. They're real in their own way, even if they aren't physical objects.
So mathematical truths or ideas like justice, they have their own kind of reality, according to this, not just human inventions.
That's the idea. They have an objective, ideal existence.
Okay, that makes a strange kind of sense. And how does this connect back to us, to the human experience?
Well, the sources touch on existentialism. If consciousness plays a role in making reality concrete, then maybe our own self-awareness confronting our existence, our anxieties, our mortality, maybe that's crucial.
Avoid what? Alienation.
Yeah, to avoid becoming just a thing person, alienated from our own authentic being. It connects the cosmic scale right back to our personal lives.
So let's recap. Existence needs movement, but maybe movement is relative. Gravity bends space-time. Reality at its base is probabilistic, collapsed by observation or information. And being itself has these layers, real and ideal.
Right, and you look at the universe, how incredibly fine-tuned it seems for life to even be possible.
Fine-tuning argument.
Yeah. Is that evidence of some conscious design, a sort of theistic view? Or is it just that we live in one universe out of maybe infinite possibilities where the conditions happen to be the multiverse or anthropic principle idea?
Either way, the odds of us being here talking about this seem incredibly small.
Astonishingly small. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on.
Go on.
If information or observation is needed to turn quantum probability into concrete reality, does the entire universe, in some sense, require a consciousness, maybe something beyond itself, to be fully real? Is the ultimate nature of being just information?